Hello and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Believe in Purdue. I am Sam Sprunger, as always, joined by Grant Flora. Grant, how are we this fine day?
Doing pretty well. Yeah. Looking forward to the middle of the week and some more high-level basketball conversation.
Yes, absolutely. We've got our first guest since we've started Believe in Purdue. Really happy and excited to have from College Hoops on Fox, Big Ten Network, and the Sporting News. We have Mike DeCourcy. Mike, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us about the Boilermakers.
Sam and Grant, it's my pleasure, and never a bad day to talk college basketball, and certainly not a bad day to talk Matt Painter and the Boilers.
Well, and I kind of wanted to ask you, there were some comments made right before during the Purdue-Ohio State game that eventually Matt Painter's going to have to open up the checkbook. And do you see that as an actual thing as, yes, okay, he's going to have to eventually, to get the guys that he wants, he's going to have to open up the checkbook to bring them to West Lafayette?
Well, I think that what that does is denies the reality that Purdue has not been, while they have decided to do things their particular way, it's not that they've never had a player who earned significant money. I mean,
Right.
We know that Zach Edey, who certainly of all college basketball players a year ago deserved significant money. We know that he got a worthwhile payday, if you want to call it that, when he was when they scheduled the game in Canada. Now, it was complicated because he's a Canadian citizen, and there are very strange rules about citizen visas, student visas, I should say. But they were able to get him, somebody was able to get him a fair amount of money. Do you have to change the way you do the program, though? I think Michigan State and Purdue are saying, no, you don't have to do that. And honestly, to an extent, I think UConn is saying that as well. I mean, they have complemented their rotation with guys in the past, like Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer. They came in and made a difference, but their program has still, over the course of their run, operated with a high number of significantly talented high school players that are willing to build through the program. Right now, you have a Solo Ball, for instance, as an example of that. And it doesn't just have to be, we're going to go out to the portal every year.
Right.
You can't close that door. If you do, Lance Jones never comes. He never hits that three, and you may not. Maybe you don't make it to the Final Four in the national championship game. But I don't think that Purdue has ever closed that door. They went back before the portal concept was in place, when they needed some backcourt stability, some veteran leadership. And although he wasn't the most creative point guard, John Octius came in and made a difference and made them better. So I think that the idea that you have to do it this way or you're not ever getting there is absolutely fallacious. What you're seeing right now from the reigning national champion, the reigning two-time national champion, says you don't close that door. You keep it open. You look for players that can make you better, but that you can still build a basketball program through high school recruiting.
And let me ask you, to me, the fact that Matt Painter told Cannon Catchings that once you gave me the ultimatum of guaranteeing playing time, go ahead and hit the door, because that's not what we do in West Lafayette. That's not our thing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get better. You don't become a championship program by guaranteeing players playing time. Right. Look, if you're in a living room with LeBron James, the next LeBron James,
right?
Let's use Cooper Flagg as an example. If you want to guarantee Cooper playing time, you can do that. But you know what? Here's the thing: Cooper Flagg's not asking for that, because he knows he's going to play. He knows if he's healthy, he's going to play, because 1, he's ultra talented. 2, he's ultra competitive. And 3, he's going to work his tail off to make you better and to make him better. So you don't have to guarantee Cooper Flagg playing time. Those are the guys that you could, and know that you're not going back on that, because you know all those 3 things about him as well. Mm-hmm. But the guys who have to ask for it are the ones who don't want to have to work for it. So I that's never going to be Matt Painter. That's never going to be Tom Izzo. It's never going to be Dan Hurley. It's never going to be Bill Self. It's never going to be anybody that wins.
No.
Wins big. You don't get when John Calipari had the 2015 Kentucky team that made it to the Final Four undefeated. There were guys on that team who Devin Booker, who I don't if he started a game, it wasn't a lot. I mean, he may have gotten in one because somebody was hurt or whatever, but he was never a regular starter on that team because they had so much ability and veteran guys ahead of him. So that's not how you build a great program. And look, Matt Painter is one of the very best coaches in college basketball. And you ask me that, I'll tell you that. You ask just about anybody who's in the game. And I'm not bouncing the ball and I'm not coaching, but I've covered this now for 37 years, I think. I'm in the game. Mm-hmm. And people like me who are in the game are going to tell you the same thing.
Let's talk about the Boilermakers now. Braden Smith, his biggest criticism, I guess, is he's got Zach Edey. That's basically what he's feeding it down to the big man. That's where he's getting his stats. The stat line he had against Michigan the other night was incredible. 24, 7 rebounds, and 10 assists with only 1 turnover. Can you talk about what you've seen from Braden Smith this season that makes you think maybe he's the player of the year in the Big Ten?
Well, I think he's just been phenomenal. And I never believed that about he's just throwing it into Zach, because you had to pay attention to the way he was throwing it into him. Mm-hmm. Like if it was just basic stand on the wing and throw in post entries to Zach, you could get a bunch of assists like that. And some of Braden's came like that. Of course, you got the best post player in the last 20 years or whatever, you throw it into him.
Right.
But it was all the different ways that they played off pick and roll and the way he was able to float it up to Zach where no one else could get it. I mean, that takes touch, that takes imagination and creativity. And Braden had all of that. And you're seeing that now. Again, he's still getting buckets when Trey Kaufman-Wren is ISO'd on a guy and he throws it into the post and somebody says, we're not doubling, and Trey beats that one-on-one. You still get assists like that. But there's still all of those things at work, different wrinkles that they're able to run that an ordinary guard can't run. It can't even think about it. And in some cases, a pretty good point guard would struggle with that. You have to be elite, and he is. I can't explain. I never saw Braden in high school. I can't explain why they didn't see it. I used to go on the road in the summers a lot more. And I saw players in the past that I thought were legit and that others weren't talking about. I can't tell you that if I'd seen Braden, I would have seen it. But I don't know how they missed it. That's the thing I can't figure out. I don't understand how they missed what he's capable of doing because there was so much there from day one. So much creativity, so much ingenuity, so much competitive fire that it never, I don't care if he was, 2.5 feet tall. It didn't make any sense to rate him as the 190th player. Yeah. As far as player of the year for the Big Ten, it's going to be an interesting race because there's no obvious Zach Edey this year. There are a lot of players who are making differences for their team. And Braden is very much at the front of that. As far as first team all Big Ten, a healthy Braden to the end of the year, it's not even a question. As far as All-America, it's just going to be a healthy Braden. How does Purdue finish? How does he play the next 6 weeks? He's going to most likely make All-America at some level, 1, 2, 3. But then player of the year, I think it might come down to, does Purdue continue to contend? That'll probably be the biggest element. And I expect that they will. But I will be frank, I have not studied everybody's schedule to say, okay, this is where it's going to come. I've had so many other things to worry about that I haven't broken it down yet. It's usually something I might get into in February and say, okay, who looks like their schedule is favorable and should be in the best position to do this. But Purdue is going to be in that race. Michigan State is going to be in that race. I think Michigan, even after Friday night in West Lafayette, I think they'll find a way to stay in that race, but they've got to fix their point guard turnover issues. That's a slash there. That's not point guard turnovers. That's point guard / turnover.
Right.
They've got to fix that. But there will be still a very competitive race in this Big Ten. But if Purdue continues on this course, it's going to be Braden as one of the leading candidates without a doubt. And the interesting thing is there may not be a candidate on the team that right now is in first place. There may not be a legit player of the year candidate. They are a very balanced team, Michigan State, very deep, use that depth brilliantly. And although Jaden Akins is having the season that they've always been looking for from him,
right.
I'm not sure that he'll put up player of the year numbers. So, but we'll see. Maybe he goes into February and starts popping in 30 and then it'll change.
Well, Mike, I've got something for you if that's all right. You talk about like the Big Ten schedule and everything. Purdue, I've glanced at their schedule. They seem like they have more of a backloaded schedule, and it feels like a lot of the Big Ten contenders right now have that. I looked at it. Purdue has played pretty much all of the bottom half of the Big Ten and beaten most of them. And now they're going to play a lot more like Michigan State, Michigan again, Illinois at the end of the season. IU's in there a couple of times. But also I look at your projections for your bracketology and see Purdue as a 3 seed. My question is, what's it going to take for Purdue to potentially elevate themselves either to a higher 3 seed or a 2 seed, given the fact that they do have a backloaded schedule with lots of big-time opportunities in front of them?
Yeah, well, first of all, Grant, I appreciate you not asking about a 1 seed because I don't think that's a realistic. I mean, and a lot of that, some might have asked me that. I think you were very realistic with that question. I think a 2 is within reach, and a 3 is certainly possible. I don't think. I mean, they'd have to completely go out of character to go even down to a 5, but that's probably the basement for them. Even with all the number of games they have left, they've shown what they're capable of. They go 500 the rest of the way. They're probably not touching 5, but it's possible. But they're not going below it. And so I think that it's interesting that February is often that kind of month in college basketball, and especially one that is media-centric, like a league that is media-centric like the Big Ten. The Big Ten is going to have a lot of its games, a lot of its most glamorous games, if everybody sort of gets it right. They're going to have their most glamorous games in February and March, early March, because that's when television has no football to get in the way. And so it makes perfect sense that we would see Purdue, Michigan State come in February when the only football game left on the schedule now is the Super Bowl. And so there's a clear sailing for college basketball to get more attention, more viewers than they have to date. And so I think that explains it. And it's probably true in most leagues. We had a pretty good Saturday on the 25th in college basketball, Kansas, Houston, Auburn, Tennessee. We had some really good games. But I think if you look in the SEC, your Auburn, Alabamas are both stacked in there. So for Purdue, I think that you have to continue to add to your collection of quad 1 wins. I think that's very.
Oh, Mike went bye-bye. He'll be back, I'm sure. It must have had a connection issue. But it'll be, you know what? We'll go ahead and take a break at this point and bring him back in when he gets back in. But you're listening to Believe in Purdue here on the Believe and Lounge Sports Network. Okay, we're back from our break. Mike DeCourcy's back now. We lost him there for a quick second. Go ahead and let's pick up where we left off.
Yeah, I was discussing the number of quad 1 wins that they have right now. They're 5-5 in quad 1, 10-5 against the first 2 quadrants. That's where you're going to want to look for a lot of what happens in seeding. There's a lot of belief now that. Whenever I see the team in my brackets for Fox Sports that's lower than maybe the consensus of my peers, or maybe what the net rankings might say, or the Ken Pom rankings might say. Well, look at their metrics. Well, I'm like, yeah, look at the metrics, because what you have to understand as a viewer is that there isn't just one kind of metric on what we might call the resume, but what the committee calls the team sheet. The team sheet, the official team sheet, has 6 metrics on it, and not including the net. So technically 7, but they have 6 metrics that are independent that are on the team sheet. They're divided up between predictive metrics, which is Ken Pom, and ESPN has one, T-Rank. Those 3 are predictive metrics. And then there are the resume metrics, and they're so underrated by the public. Resume metrics are really important. They have a lot to do with getting in, a fair amount to do with where you're seated. Your resume metrics combined with your quad records are really important. And you can't just ignore those, because it's so easy to look at Ken Pom and say, okay, there's your 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, that's it. It's not as simple as that, or that's how they would do it. If those resume metrics and your quad 1 record didn't factor in, then Purdue would have been Auburn would have been a 2 seed last year instead of a 4. But Auburn had a low number of quad 1 wins. They were under 500 in quad 1 last year, I believe, and so they wound up a 4 seed, and it cost them, because they lost their first round game to Yale, I believe. So there's a combination of factors there that are really important, and it's not as simple as what is your net rank, what is your Ken Pom. I can tell you right now that Purdue's resume metrics, the result metrics, are excellent. KPI has them 3 in the country. That's a 1 seed resume. Strength of record has them 10. That's a 3 seed. And wins above bubble has them at 6. So that they're in very good position to finish as a 2 seed if they continue this way. I should say a very good position to be finished at 3 seed if they finish this way, and the 2 seed is in reach.
Let's talk about the next opponent for the Boilermakers, and we Grant and I enjoy seeing Mike, the Indiana Hoosiers struggling because of our allegiance to Purdue, but we understand also when IU is good, it's good for the conference and it's good for college basketball. But can you kind of talk about what's going on in Bloomington with the struggles that the Hoosiers have had recently, and now they've got to come into Mackey on Friday?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to explain, because when they've been good, they've been very good, and when they've been disappointing, they've been very disappointing.
Right.
With the exception of the loss to Maryland on Sunday, the vast majority of their losses have been double digit, have been significantly disappointing, way below what the Indiana standard has been historically, obviously, but also really way below what this team's standard has been. But very frustrating for Indiana fans to lose that Maryland game when they came back so nicely, when they had a possible win, at least if not in their pocket, they were starting to put it in their wallets. They had a great opportunity there, and then they got a bad break, because it's quite possible that Maryland traveled on their decisive play, but also quite obvious that Indiana missed the opportunity to foul at some point in that sequence. I loved Steve Lapp. Steve's a good friend and a great guy. Steve Lapis, before the play started, said, you don't give the foul just to give it. And way too many teams do that. Just, okay, we're just gonna come out and hit you. Well, what did that do? All it did was focus that team on, instead of their killing clock, they know they got to go get a bucket. So I don't think there's any value to that. But if you get beaten, if somebody gets behind you and you can bump them off the drive, and you can use your physicality at that point to maybe disrupt the play and not have the foul called and wind up with the basketball, or wind up with the opposition taking a bad shot, use it. And I thought that it was a brilliant observation by Steve. And then Indiana comes out and has 2 opportunities late, Like when the ball got to the middle of the lane, why not? I mean, the ball's in the middle of the lane. You don't know he's going to maybe sort of kind of shuffle his feet. You know the ball's in the middle of the lane. That means you're in trouble. That means your defense has probably sagged off of somebody and probably overreacted to the penetration because it's not a 3-point game. It's not a 4-point game. You're probably left somebody open. So bump him. I don't want to use the word hit him because it sounds bad,
right?
But that's kind of what you got to do. And they let it go. And then when the ball came out to the perimeter, the defender was out of position relative to closing out, but he still had an opportunity probably to get there to foul, and he didn't. So those are the things that in watching Indiana, you wonder about, like what happened there? Why did that happen? Why was that foul to give not exercised? When you have an advantage as a defense, you have to use it, and they did not. And they wound up surrendering the game-winning bucket and were unable to conjure one of their own. And the last effort by IU was not the most attractive basketball play ever executed either. So those two ends, very frustrating. And in this Big Ten, I'd say it's even more so. I'm not trying to being a member of the staff at the Big Ten, someone who regularly appears as an analyst. I'm not trying to be Big Ten centric here. I will acknowledge the SEC is better. So I would say the same thing if I were talking about the SEC. In this particular season, the SEC is having a better year. But the Big Ten is still having a terrific year and has a wide variety of terrific teams and almost an entire universe of competitive teams, as we've seen from Minnesota over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
You have to be really good almost every night. Almost every time you walk on the floor in your uniform, you're going to have to be really good to get out with a W. And so Indiana was really good at times on Sunday. They haven't been really good on every occasion, as we mentioned, and they certainly weren't really good on those two, the offensive and defensive executions in a game that was winnable for them at home.
Yeah. You know, Mike, you look at Indiana and the roster they put together this season, you have Umar Ballo and Malik Renew, both as really prominent big guys. They play together pretty often. You know, last year with Khalil Ware and Renew, I think there was talk about the fact that those two big guys just didn't really play well together, didn't mesh super well. And now we see Mike Woodson bring in another big-time big guy in Umar Ballo and Renew trying to play together. I just wondered what your thoughts were on the way the roster has been constructed these last couple of years. If you think it's something that works and can still be pretty lethal, or if it's something that maybe isn't quite flowing super well.
Well, I don't think that having two bigs is a problem, or Michigan State wouldn't be undefeated in the league. Michigan State takes the floor with two bigs in their starting lineup, and almost every rotation they have, with the exception of the minutes that Xavier Booker plays, are two lane-based bigs. I won't say post-based necessarily, but certainly lane-based. And they are able to win big with that. So I won't say that you can't win like that. I mean, let's be honest. Purdue a year ago, Trey Kaufman-Renn in his rotations, which was more than half the time, playing with Zach, they had two lane-based bigs, absolutely. So I don't think that's the problem. And in fact, a year ago when Ware was there, Ware was actually he could play on the perimeter, was really good at it. The problem a year ago was that they had no point guard play. And that's pretty much what they've gotten themselves into again. They've decided that Miles Rice is less comfortable as a full-time point guard than as someone who plays with the ball in his hands sometimes, but isn't granted the responsibility to run the offense 30-plus minutes a game. That's the decision they've come to. And so Trey Galloway plays a lot more as a point guard. And it didn't work a year ago. It's working better now because they have more and better options. But it's still not the situation that Michigan State has with two big-time point guards in Fears and Richardson, that Purdue has with Braden, that other teams that are highly competitive in the Big Ten have. It's still the most important position on the floor. Point guard has been probably since Bill Walton finished. I think at that point when Walton and Kareem were there from 67 to 73 with just a couple of brief window without them, I think you could probably say center was the most important position in basketball. But for a long time since, you have to have your Phil Ford. And I hope I'm not dating myself there and you guys remember who Phil Ford is.
Yep.
You have to have that guy. There have been teams that have won it without great centers. David McCormack at Kansas was a fine player, but not a great player. He's not. I don't believe he's in the NBA now because he wasn't a great player. But he was a fine player at the big. But they had next level point guard play in terms of quarterback type style with DeJuan Harris. And if you don't have that guy, you're going to struggle at some point. You're going to lose games you don't have to lose. And as we've seen, Purdue, Michigan State, those teams don't have to worry about that. And it's a big part of the reason why they're as successful as they are.
Before we let you go, Mike, Purdue, Michigan State, is there a third or a fourth team that contends for this conference championship?
Well, I kept thinking that Oregon would be one of those teams, but Oregon has not been able to be consistent enough, and they've not been able to build a home court advantage along the lines that you want. Illinois is certainly talented enough to be a team that, if they solve some of their development issues, I think Yakachonis has to be a consistently smarter player than he's been as he's gotten toward what we might have called the freshman wall. Mm-hmm. He had the game where he fouled out against, I believe it was against Michigan State a couple of Sundays ago, where he fouled out in 8 or 9 minutes. And the third and fourth foul were kind of iffy. The touch and go could have gone either way. But the fifth foul was not a smart foul. He curls around a screen, he gets behind his guy, and he fouls him from behind. Never a good play. Right. And unless you're up 3 with 3.5 seconds left, and you want to keep a great 3-pointer shooter from taking a 3. Never a good play to foul from behind on that, and he did that. Through a lot of bad turnovers in their subsequent home loss to Maryland. And then he comes back and has a brilliant game. So that's he's got to be better. But Illinois can maybe have a really high ceiling in the NCAA tournament with the talent that they have. But I think it would take significant retreats from Michigan State and Purdue that we're not seeing. I think the real question, like, Wisconsin's going to be in the picture, but probably isn't in this particular season a likely Big Ten champion. But they're going to hang in the picture and be a pain, and maybe it sort of falls into their hands because they hung so long. Maybe, and then the question is, does Michigan can they be in the race? Can they be good? They're really good. The more they run the ball through Danny Wolf, the more impressed I am. Even he had a tough game at Purdue, obviously, but really impressive addition to the Wolverines. Love watching him play. I love watching guys who make things happen. Yeah. But the point guard thing is a real question. And when you're trying to win those February and early March games against high-level competition with everyone knowing that the Big Ten championship is at stake, it's really hard to do without that player. Trey Donaldson's a terrific player, but is he that point guard that we've discussed that some of the other contenders have? So I do think there's a very good chance it comes down to the Boilers and Spartans again. They've been the most common Big Ten champions over the course of the last, really almost over the course of my entire time at BTN, which started in 2010. I haven't looked at it, but those two teams have won a ton of championships. I know Ohio State won a bunch, and Michigan under John Beilein, my buddy John Beilein at BTN, they won a bunch of them. So I think it'll be the two, but the Big Ten, again, as I said, very, very deep. If Michigan can go into Minnesota and get an L, and Oregon can go into Minnesota and get an L, then you know that you better be ready to play every time you go on the road. I think there's nothing new about that. but there are people coming into your gym that are going to give you a run too.
Yeah, Purdue found that out with Ohio State the other night.
Exactly.
So that's Mike DeCourcy, College Hoops on Fox, Big Ten Network, the Sporting News. Thanks so much for coming in to Believe in Purdue and talking about the Boilermakers and kind of the makeup of the Big Ten this season. Appreciate you so much, and find him everywhere. Get his bracketology. He's one of the best. Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I still call it that, at TSN Mike. And you can find my brackets on Fox's college basketball social channels, which are at CBB on Fox. And with the exception of February 22nd, you will see me every Saturday from now to the end of the regular season doing studio work at BTN.
Well, you're one of the best in the business, and we appreciate you coming on and talking to us today. Greatly appreciate it.
Sam and Grant, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant,
Thank you, Mike.
What a great episode. And you know what? This is it for Believe in Purdue on this Wednesday. We'll see you on Friday.